Morning, everybody. How you doing?
Morning, Rob. Doing good.
We'll wait a few minutes to get started. Anybody have anything, any interesting insight for the week you want to share, or any questions?
Yeah, hey Rob. And I had a couple of classes this week uh, on the new law, and some interesting questions came up. One of them was if a um, a listing is taken, say June 1st, and it doesn't sell until the end of June or end of July rather, um, because all the fields are going to be taken out in the middle as soon as the law passes, correct? So
Yep.
all the fields on the MLS will be taken out. So does that mean that the listing agent has to revise their listing now? Because
Um,
there's no compensation for the other broker. So is
well,
it changed over to concessions to buyers now?
so I would say that we have time to review it, but my initial response would be if we're going to still offer compensation, we could leave it as compensation. If we're going to change it to a offer of seller or buyer concession, we would put either an addendum or have it re-signed.
Okay. And also, another question that they brought up was, one of the agents said, well, we won't sign your buyer's broker agreement because we already have one signed by our attorney.
I'm
And I know some attorneys have real estate license, but I mean, um, I don't know, how do you address that? Because that was, it was one of the questions that the agents brought up, thought was pretty good. Wanted to share that with you.
well, I mean, I would say that that would be um, a separate representation agreement. I don't know if, suggesting that they consider working with a real estate professional as opposed to an attorney is contractual interference, but I would say it's educational right now. And um, maybe they're even confused with the retainer letter with their attorney versus a buyer agency agreement. Because when you hire an attorney, you sign a retainer, but it's not for the same services that we do.
Right, that attorney is not gonna spend time showing you properties, or anything like that, or going through the inspection. Is that correct?
Unless it's like an attorney that's also an active realtor, I don't think
Right,
that that's the same,
right,
solution, right?
right.
So, I mean, education is the key here. Education and
As long as you're here,
communication,
that's all you really
Yeah.
need to do, right?
right? So, and I apologize, but Elizabeth or Ron, do we have
Is he
the
sleeping?
fire agency agreement?
Morning, everyone.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Hold on, I'm gonna mute everybody. So you can unmute yourself to talk. Do we have the final Florida buyer agency agreement?
No, I don't have it. I have the
Elizabeth,
old.
Elizabeth, do they have the new one out yet or no?
No, I was asking Seth about that the other day, and he said that he thinks it'll be out sometime next month.
Okay.
Uh,
And Elizabeth or Colleen, have we seen like previews of it yet or no?
No, nothing yet.
Okay. So we gotta stay tuned with it. I'm guessing it's gonna be similar to the New Jersey one. And the New Jersey one has some interesting now a 5-page agreement. And Florida people don't think this is a New Jersey event, and Virginia don't think I don't love you. But in the New Jersey one, since Florida doesn't have one, it does provide for a retainer. It does provide for um, specific instructions for us to advise listing agents and sellers that our contracts are contingent upon them paying the contractual fee to us. There is a dual agency provision, which is different from Florida, and there is a big change in philosophy where they say that an unpaid commission now becomes a lien on the property because this is being signed by the buyer. The buyer closes on it, doesn't pay us, then they agree that this could be a lien on the property.
Good.
So those are some interesting changes here. You know, I look at it and everything is all about more transparency and how do we deliver more value. And before I get into like the five don'ts and the five don'ts are not being negative, but the five don'ts are being preventive, right? I want to make sure that we don't fall into any traps with these changes. So
Yeah, I
before
read
we get go ahead.
that. I read that. It was pretty good.
So
I have one more question.
yeah.
Okay, that was brought up in my class. If you're holding an open house and a buyer comes in unrepresented by no one, how do you handle it? Do you do a one-time buyer's broker agreement at the open house, or do you just let them view the property? I would think you'd have to sign a buyer's broker agreement in order to view the property, even if it's just that one property for one day or something like that.
Um, you know, I'm imagining, and I don't see, like we're getting ahead of it, Ron, which is really good. But I would imagine maybe we can have a electronic, buyer like agreement and say to somebody when they come in, look, with the changes in the law, I need to send you this agreement saying that if you make an offer on this house, I would be your agent, right? Unless they specifically tell you that they have an agent, at which point we're gonna have to figure out how we're handling it. I had and I don't know if anybody on the call here is aware of this, but somebody told me that their client went to an open house this past weekend, and the sign said, if your agent isn't here and you enter the open house, if you make an offer, it must go through me.
Wow,
Basically posted on the sign.
no kidding.
Does
Wow.
anybody, I don't know if anybody on this call was copied on that communication or is aware of that, but
That in New
that
Jersey? What state was that?
was in New Jersey.
Wow.
Yeah, it's happened before. Some of the agents just get a little frisky and tired of, other agents sending their people over to the open house. Whenever I'm sending someone over, I always call the listing agent and say, listen, I have an open house myself. I'm sorry I
Yeah.
can't make it. Is it okay if I send my client over?
Yeah.
And for the most part, it's usually okay. Very rarely does that happen.
Yeah, I mean, Fran, we have to look at, and everybody on the call have to look at, what is our reputation in the industry, and sometimes what goes around comes around. So, maybe in the short term, you might think that's a good philosophy, but if you're going to be in the business for a while, that might not be the brand that you want to have. So I'm not saying that don't ever do that, but I'm just saying that we need to look at all the implications of our activities.
How do you truly represent the seller at that open house by turning people away, right? That's a question that those people need to ask themselves.
And we're going to, Fran, that's a great question. We're going to talk about that in my, we have the five, things to avoid or don't. Actually, as I was going through it, I actually came up with 7. So I apologize. I'm giving you some extra value. So you get 2 for free.
Hey,
I want to talk about for just a moment some of the value add that we might have. And I see Brian is on and he's got a collared shirt, so you must be ready to go.
I always wear a collared shirt, Rob.
And Brian, if you can not talk about, hey, I pre-approve people, hey, we do approvals quickly, but maybe there's some enhanced value, or maybe there's some, grants and subsidies that we can
Because you
provide
have to look at
buyers.
the, you have to look at the concern about the office reputation also, and not to turn the buyer away.
Can we mute?
Yep, I did. So Brian, if you can unmute yourself, maybe there's some programs that will give people real financial benefit, And, probably those type of programs, I'm sure as a lender, you probably get paid the same or maybe even a little bit less, but it's all about doing the right thing for clients.
Yeah.
And, if you could talk about maybe one or two programs for maybe a maximum of a minute, and then we're going to talk about a weekly event, one for New Jersey and one for Florida. So Brian, if you could go and maybe give us something that could add value to a buyer consultation by
Yeah.
being partnered with Cornerstone First.
Yeah. So part of loan officer's role is obviously to, fully discuss all possible options with a borrower, whether they're a first-time home buyer or a repeat buyer. Don't forget that there are grant programs out there. Not everyone qualifies, of course. Those grant programs, in my opinion, are marketing incorrectly because, they say, hey, first-time home buyer, get this grant. It doesn't mean that everyone, because they're a first-time home buyer, qualifies for a grant. There are a couple different ways of grants are structured. A lot of them are based loosely on the FHA and conventional underwriting guidelines, and that grant is in addition to. The grant money can be anywhere from 10,000 to 22,000, depending. And this is a New Jersey program. This is the NJHMFA, New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Authority program. This is based on borrowers' income limits, credit score. Like I said, they're based on the standard guidelines, FHA and conventional, but they do have the overlays. So not everyone, just because you're a first-time home buyer, does qualify for it. There is another one that we offer, which actually allows 100% financing. So this is based on FHA guidelines. The first mortgage is 96.5% of the purchase price, and the grant, which is a second mortgage, an actual second mortgage with repayment terms of the 3.5%. And
And
again,
Brian, who's the
requirements and debt to income ratio requirements.
Brian, who's the grant from there?
The grant is something that we provide. It's
Okay.
something that we are an approved lender for a lender. We're a correspondent lender, so we underwrite in-house. There are certain lenders, as far as like Cornerstone First Mortgage is, we are approved to provide these grants. So we underwrite these loans in-house. We do everything in-house. It's done by us. So this is not something the borrower has to apply for.
So for everybody on the call, one of the things that I would just mention is, our leadership team and myself stand behind the people that we vetted out. So I'll bet you if you've been in the business more than 3 years, you've had the unfortunate circumstance of a transaction, everything's going well. And then as soon as you stop hearing from the lender, if you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent, what's usually happened there, Ron Piccolo? I can see the pain on your face. When the lender stops communicating,
It's panic all of a sudden.
Right.
right? So it's bad news. So when you work with a partner, we're not going to run. These people are vetted because they don't do that. That's not their business model. And I want to talk a little bit just for a moment for our team in Florida and Virginia. I'm going to show you some love, but I don't have the information here right now. In Florida, our partner at Motto has a Fannie Mae program that is based upon the zip code where you live, okay, not where you're buying, and it gives you up to a $6,000 credit. Okay, it's $5,000 towards closing costs, and it's $500 towards a home warranty, and up to $500 towards your home appraisal. And apparently, he's done 2 of these for our team in Florida. It's been flawless. It's a Fannie Mae program. There's no hits to the interest rate, because there are programs that lenders can do where, hey, the rate is 7%, but if I give you 8.25, I can give you $5,000 back. That's like a negative point. That's not the program. This is a Fannie Mae grant, zip code oriented, first time home buyer, or haven't owned in the past 3 years. and only one of the buyers has to fit into that box. Okay, so if there's two buyers, one person can own 10 investment properties and the other person could have sold their house 3 years and a day ago, they would qualify. And I said to Frank, I said, is it only for, less desirable or lower income tracts? And he had said that the last one he did was somebody that lived in Coral Springs, which for you in Florida, you know what that is, but in New Jersey, it's not a bad place to live for sure. And then Motto has a program with a 3.5% grant on an FHA program, which is not a second mortgage, it's a true grant. And that one does have a slightly higher rate, but it's not because they're building the rate up. It's just because that lender isn't the most competitive on the scale. So on Tuesdays,
Rob, excuse my apologies. This is Karma with Remax at Princeton. I wanted to have one question. Some of the buyer with the FHA, they waive the inspections issue, except like structural or environmental. And I understand for FHA, the appraisal can be also part of the inspection. If something come as part of the appraisal inspection, who will take care of that? Because the buyer already waived his right for that.
all right, so that's a great question. I'm a little bit outside the scope here, but Karma, what I would suggest is, and I've seen this happen both in our New Jersey and our Florida markets, the agents have been building into the contract, if there are any FHA required repairs, the buyer would be willing to assume those in order to get the seller to accept an FHA offer over a conventional. So that's something I've seen a few times in both markets. Brian, Joelle, have any of you seen that, Tiffany, where your buyer is assuming any type of FHA conditions to get the seller to accept it, or no?
Not on FHA. I haven't seen that.
Okay.
Tiffany, have you?
No, and believe it or not, this whole assumption for FHA, the assuming of the mortgage, has been around forever. But we personally probably haven't seen any or limited in our career because it just doesn't generally happen. This is the
Well,
first time.
Tiffany, what I'm talking about is assuming, like, let's say if Ron Piccolo has the listing and Dan brings in a contract that's conventional and Robert Garver brings in a contract that's FHA, I think traditional wisdom is Ron would probably be more inclined to go with the conventional versus FHA. Is that fair to say, Ron?
I would, yeah.
Yes,
But
that's fair to say.
but if Dan was to say, if there are any conditions from the appraisal required by FHA, my buyer will assume those conditions in order to induce the listing agent and the seller to accept that offer.
You mean the conditions for things to be repaired?
Correct.
So the repairs would actually have to be made prior to closing because the appraisal is going to be cost to repair prior to the appraisal is not going to be validated by underwriting and won't be able to close until those repairs are completed.
Right.
That's correct, Rob. Rob, this is Scott. We've got two deals right now like that. One's a refinance, one's an actual deal that's closing next week. One of them, it was conventional. They had to switch to FHA because of the rate increase in debt to income. So when they switched to FHA, the bedrooms did not have flooring. It was just concrete. The buyer realized it was such a good deal that we were past basically all the issues. They actually paid to put the floors in because they knew that we had the contract to close.
Before they owned the house, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, so that's what I'm seeing, Joel, is buyers, in order to make themselves more attractive, are willing to say that we will assume those repairs that are required prior to closing.
That's fine, as long as they're willing to take the risk.
As long as they're willing to do it and get it done,
Right.
so the appraisal could get signed off, that's not an issue.
Right. So what we're seeing here, Joel, is like, the better relationship that we have with our our lender and realtor connection, the better we're able to give a consistent piece of advice. Now, there's inherent risks in that, and everybody's going to tell you, look, if we fix it up and for some reason you don't close, you just improve somebody's house. But there's you pay a risk when you do an inspection, you do a home appraisal. There's risk in it. So that's something I've seen, at least 3 times in the past 30 days, both in New Jersey and Florida, where somebody said, I don't want to take an FHA, and they went and they did that. Okay. There was another.
Definitely in this market, you have to get creative, but yeah, like, as long as the buyer is willing to do it and move forward with it, sure.
Right. And I can tell you, if we, our lending partners, and if you have somebody else that you work with, that synergy that you have just provides peace of mind to buyers to move forward. Right. So, and as a group, we're going to be sharing ideas that we can do to, help buyers with this transition and demonstrate more value. So I look at this, and as we've been, about 6 weeks since that announcement, I just think that our business model is improving because of the change that happened. People ask me, Rob, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? And you know what? I don't think about that because I can't change it. Okay. So I just think of it as a thing. And I think of it as, how can we use the resources that we have to, deliver value where somebody wants to sign this. The only reason why people don't sign this is because of the norm. We've been doing it for so long that, it's an obstacle in our own mind. Somebody who comes into the business 6 months from now is going to say, oh, it's so easy. How could you ever have trouble getting this? Because they never knew anything different. Okay. And I would suggest in Florida, when this comes out, read the whole agreement. Okay. And figure out how you fit into this agreement to provide that value. Okay. So those are some of the things. Tuesdays every week, just like we do this session, at 10 o'clock, our New Jersey team, led by Idona, Fran, Marilyn, they're going to be doing a weekly New Jersey focused meeting, going over statistics in New Jersey, regulatory changes in New Jersey, basically things that are going to help us to be better in New Jersey. And in Florida, we're doing it on Wednesday, and in Virginia, we'll have to, pick a time for doing that. But, these are, so put it in your calendar. Tuesday at 10 o'clock, it's a New Jersey only. Wednesday at 10 o'clock, Florida only meeting. Okay. All the specifics to our states are fair game on those times. Now, in terms of, today's meeting, I don't like to be the negative, but I did put things to avoid or not to do. And I'm going to pull that up, and then I'm going to share my screen. Give me a second.
While you're doing that, I was just going to mention the FHA. If you list a house, like we had a house that needed a lot of repairs, and it's hard to take an FHA on one of those type of listings. So most of the time we just put, conventional or cash only. So it's a little difficult when you have to have an FHA and the house needs a lot of repair.
And Ron, again, it might require a little bit more work, but I look back and I've seen our lenders call listing agents, and they will promote the merits of the buyer. Our lending team is, I don't know anybody that probably doesn't have 10 years experience. They know a lot of people. They can conduct a conversation with integrity to identify how a buyer can perform on the transaction, and that does matter. But,
Rob, if I could just throw this out there, I lost you for a second, so I don't know if it was mentioned, but we've been doing 203K, FHA 203K.
So I was gonna say.
I was going to say the
For
same
all of those tough properties, and really, I mean, the first one is a little scary because you may not know what you're doing, but they're excellent loans, and then the repair amount could be as little as $5,000. So I would look into that as an option for those homes that need a little extra, and it puts us in a situation where we're heroes because a lot of people can't swing those homes. They don't know how to. So I just food for thought. I would not walk away from that.
So Rob, I met with your student and your son Zach, who told me that he had a property that went FHA. It needed a little bit of work, but not much, and it underappraised. And once you have an FHA appraisal, it's very difficult to change that. They actually flipped it to a 203K and were able to document after improvements that it would make the value. So, he saved a transaction by being creative and having a great partnership with his lender.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's right.
I mean, I was like, I was so impressed with that creativity. I just want to share that with the team. So here's my must avoids from the NAR settlement, and these are a lot of discussion points. These are not designed to be, putting fear in your mind, but these are designed to have an awareness when you make your decisions. We have to focus on the value that we provide instead of the lack of payment by the buyer. We have to avoid working with buyers without a written agreement. It's not optional. It's not best practice. It's now required. So we must avoid listing the buyer's compensation in the comments of the MLS. Okay. This is not a time to be cute, to be tricky, to, try to, find a workaround to the system, because I don't want to be a target. Okay. I want to do things above board. If somebody else does it, don't come to me and say somebody else is doing it, because, that's not the culture that we have. We're going to win the right way. Avoid the temptation to breach our ethical duties. Okay. There are times when it's right not to offer compensation and the seller understands it. And there are times that might be a self-serving financial decision. And I think that, we still have, our code of ethics and our fiduciary duty to do right by the client. And if we're in the business for the long haul, that's a guiding principle I think we need to all adhere to. We cannot imply that there's a standard or a fixed price for service. That's the hot button and that's the button why co-op or the clear cooperation commission offerings are no longer going to be displayed on the MLS. So it needs to be market based. We can't work together as a group. And this was something, for example, when some of these discount companies like Foxtons or Purple Bricks comes in, said we're going to have a different economic model. Remax and Remax, the two Remax offices, Remax and Coldwell Banker can't get together and say, hey, we're going to not show Purple Bricks listings and put them out of business. I think that would be problematic. And ironically, as I was doing my research, tie-in agreements are something that historically the DOJ has gone into. And, me and Google, I Googled, tie-in agreements, and what comes up is real estate. Says the seller requests the purchase of a separate product or property contingent upon the sale of the first. And, tie-ins are something that, are part of the Sherman Antitrust Act. Tie-ins are things that might seem innocent, but we need to have an awareness of the way that if you're going to do a purchase and a sale together, you need to be very careful that you're not violating the Antitrust Act by forcing them to do business with you on one transaction for another. So, yeah, and then we look, what is an example of a tie-in arrangement? One example of this is the Google's exact response. One example of a tie-in arrangement includes if a real estate agent agrees to sell a property on the condition that the buyer lists the property with their firm. So that seems to me that we're not out of the sight of regulators. And for those of you who don't know, the Sherman Antitrust Act is the federal statute that prohibits activities that restrict interstate commerce and the competition in the marketplace. The Sherman Antitrust Act imposes criminal penalties up to $1 million for a corporation and $1 million for an individual, along with up to 10 years in prison. Not said to scare you, but certainly, in this world of social media where we're very transparent, we need to be careful about things that we post, because those are the things, in my opinion, that would implicate us. And even if you get a slap on the wrist, it would be quite embarrassing to be called out doing something that's borderline anti-competitive. Okay, so
But I have a question about that.
go ahead.
So the key word to me there is requires. That's like a very extreme and definite term, requires. If you want your offer to be accepted, you have to list your house with me. However, we recommend LandQuest for a lot of our transactions. And the way that we do that is like, hey, we've been working with LandQuest. We have a great relationship. The transaction will go smoother. So there's a little bit of a gray area. And it's also like, is there a way of saying, well, I'm not requiring this, but your offer certainly would look a little bit better.
So Niren,
if you
I think
like,
Niren, I think you're probably looking at this a little bit on the extreme side. And I want to give an example that I think is even more relatable. Okay, let's say that you're representing a seller, right? And somebody comes in with a home sale contingency in your open house, right?
sure.
And the seller says to you, Niren, I don't want to accept the home sale contingency unless you, my agent, can tell me that you can get that sold in that time frame, right?
Sure.
So that would be the client saying, I want to have the certainty of a professional I know, versus you saying to them, hey, before I present this, I want to make sure that you'll list your house with me so I can get two ends, right? So those would be two different examples of how I can see it being problematic and not problematic. So, if there is if that, LandQuest will, not delay the transaction, that there's a value to having a competent counterpart, right? I think that's, hey, I suggest you use LandQuest. They, always help us out. They close on time, or whatever that party is. I think that we're not in that gray area. But I think if you were to post somewhere and say, hey, any contingent offers must list with me their house if they have a home sale contingency, without having the seller explicitly tell you that, might be something that might violate this.
Right. So
Okay.
it is really just about the definitive extremeness of the language and how you present it.
Right. And
Okay.
I don't know, Niren, of any active enforcement here, but I will tell you that when I'm aware of what's happening, I know I think Amazon has been accused of violating the Sherman Act. I see now Microsoft is violating the Sherman Act. I think there was a time that Facebook was accused of violating the Sherman Antitrust Act. Apple. I know that a lot of mergers that have been going on between companies have been declined or denied because they said that they would be anti-competitive. So the business environment is one that this might be something that, we need to have an awareness of. And if nothing else, don't post things on social where there's a trail that could implicate you or be misconstrued against the true meaning of it. Okay.
Got it.
Make sense? These requirements, and mostly the new ones are, we don't represent that we're free. Working with buyers require written agreement. I think the second one's definitely a great thing. I think if you see something that's free, like if you get something that's free, do you see real value in it in general or no?
No.
Like anything that's free, I'm always questioning what's the value. So I think, saying that, hey, I'll represent you as a buyer for free, kind of diminishes our value proposition. And I personally, this is not, me just trying to be rah-rah, but I think that this is forcing me to define a better value proposition to our buyers so that they do willingly agree to enter into a written agreement with us. And if we don't modify the agreement, there is a 3-day out from the agreement, which says, hey, if you don't like the services I'm providing, send me an email, send me a text message, and in 3 days, you're out of the agreement. Okay. And in the New Jersey agreement, which I suspect will be in the Florida agreement, and I don't know if Virginia works this way, but there's a parity here because it says the agent can fire the client with 3 days notice too. So you can fire your buyer and say, hey, I choose not to work with you anymore. By the way, the 11 properties I showed you that are listed here, if you make an offer on them, I'm your agent because I introduced you to it. So this might, in fact, eliminate those procuring cause panels, right? Those commission disputes. I don't know if Deborah or Fran, if you've had any conversations at the state level or at the board level, if you think that procuring cause will be like a thing of the past. We won't be talking about that much with this new business model.
I'm here. There's still something that says in procuring cause, if there's any kind of a break between the buyer and the agent, that break is still going to come into play on the procuring cause. Because we had a case like that not long ago.
But I think the interesting thing, Deborah, is this agreement here states that if you buy it, you owe it to me. So then, you might be on the hook for 2 commissions.
Right.
Like, and it remains to be seen how this plays out. But now there's a contractual right to get paid as opposed to a procuring cause from somebody that you have no agreement with.
Right. But if there is a break and say they go 3 months and they haven't had any conversations with that agent, and then they are working with another agent, and I know they have that buyer broker signed, but if that other agent is now getting them into other things and they do break with the original agent, that break is going to be part of the problem, and it's going to be on the agent to prove that they have not broken the relationship and that they have tried to stay in contact with that buyer, because that's one of the issues on procuring cause is the break.
Yeah,
even with the buyer broker agreement, because I was a mediator on one.
So Deborah, I'm not sure that might have to evolve, because I think that the purpose of the agreement is, and Florida again hasn't had this out yet, but in New Jersey, when the attorney had spoken to this, he said that you are going to send a written notification within 10 days, which is required. So you send it in 11 days, you lose your right. And then if they buy one of those 3, 7, 15 properties that you showed them, that you're entitled to compensation. And by agreement, you're not staying in touch with them because you've ended the agreement. But it says this agreement ends, but these particular properties I'm still entitled to compensation on. So there might be a pivot there, Deborah, in terms of
I know that's something that we have a 5-hour professional standards meeting in Washington next week.
right. So like this is something that's going to evolve.
Right.
But I believe, and I could be wrong, and Deborah, you could be right, but I think that there's going to be a lot less of the procuring cause, and it's going to be more of a contract based determination.
Oh, there's absolutely going to be a lot less of them, but there's going to be little innuendo. There's going to be all kinds of little things that have been seeping up. And that's what I can't wait to see what they're bringing in.
Yep. I mean, so, if somebody asks us, hey, how do we feel about it? We can't change it. So I
Right.
choose to be positive about it. The chambers team, we did about an hour in person, then we did another 90 minutes of role playing as a team. Anybody from the chambers team on? Maybe they had enough of me. 3 hours in 1 week. But we had a discussion, and the conversation was, I'm talking to Ron Piccolo, and I'm saying, hey Ron, have you heard about some of the changes that have happened in our industry? Yeah,
I'm on, Rob. I
All
thought
right.
the meetings were great because even though I've been sitting in on Marilyn's meetings, it was great role play and opportunity to understand that the process is ever evolving, and we're trying to get ahead of it, and that we need to master our conversations that we're going to begin to have with these clients so that we are a step above the game. So I commend Rob for doing that with us. It was a great opportunity.
Well, and you guys put yourself out there by role playing with the group, and
Mhm.
basically what we did was right now I think the industry is going around like this. You don't ask me that question, right? They're kind of hoping that they don't bring that up, and if they do, in most cases they're being defensive in the explanation, and I think that they're completely in their rights, and I have my opinion about the motivation behind it, but that doesn't serve me and it doesn't serve the client. If I'm being defensive and explaining why, this happened or why our industry got a punch in the gut, I don't think that's moving us forward. I think that's just, probably moving us backwards or at best treading water. So if somebody asks the question, hey, so I meet somebody, let me just take a step back. I meet somebody and we're talking about how a relationship might work, right? And they say, hey, I heard that, the industry got a big lawsuit and there's a lot of changes going on. They get sued for doing something wrong. And then you try to explain it, you sound defensive, right? But if I come to you proactively and I say, hey, Ron, I don't know if you heard, but there's a lot of exciting changes happening in our industry. And you might say, yeah, I heard about that lawsuit. Oh, yeah, I think that lawsuit has helped us better identify the value proposition we have, and it's forced us to put everything in writing. Wouldn't you agree having any business relationship in writing is a good thing, Ron? You're on mute, sir.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
And these changes that have happened as a result of that action have provided more transparency and more options to both buyers and sellers. Now, is there anyone that thinks that buyers and sellers have less options now? I mean, the only option that they don't have as a buyer is they can't really work with somebody without a written agreement. But having the written agreement identifies how we're going to work together, right?
I think it's a good
And,
thing.
and seller,
I'm sorry. According to the new contract for New Jersey, they said, let's say you have an agreement with a buyer, and let's say this agreement has been expired or somehow been terminated, that actually, as an agent, you show them this home to send homes that is actually has been shown by you, to tell them, listen, when you go to the new buyer, please give them this list, so that actually he will be basically aware of it, that if he bought the same house, that will be actually the commission will be due to Remax at closing.
so
This is what I understood. This is
right,
something.
so Karma, you're saying the new buyer's agent, not new buyer. So buyer ends a relationship with one realtor, goes to another realtor, and they should give the list of the properties that the other agent has is entitled to be paid on per contract.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
I mean, these are all good things, right? I
It
think
is
they're good things for
absolutely.
buyers, and I think it's good things for the 131 people that are on this call today. Or, you know, maybe there's a group, maybe we have 170 people on because you're doing it from the office. But I believe these are all good things, and I believe that if we're not taking the initiative, we're not taking the lead, then we're going to play defense. Okay.
Yeah, to my understanding also that the buyer that you work with and you show him this home, he is the one will be responsible to give that list to the new agent. So that, and if for any reason, if he bought that house with the other agent, that is, he knows that is a commission is due to Remax at closing.
Yep. So,
Thank you.
is there anyone else that, you know, has added any twist to their buyer's value proposition that maybe you could share with the group? You know, I just put out there that, you know, I'm going to lean into our lending partners and find out what else you can do, and then make that part of the value proposition that I have, and say, you know, if you work with, you know, Cornerstone First or Motto, we have a relationship where you might be able to get a grant, which is money that you don't have to pay back if you're a first-time home buyer, or a grant if you live in a particular zip code. And even if it doesn't benefit them, at least you shook that tree and you looked to see if there was anything available for them that was helping the client first before self-serving and, you know, helping us just make a sale. Anybody else have anything that you've built into your buyer consultation, your buyer strategy session?
Hey, Rob, just on one other thing on what they were saying a second ago, we have a new form that they're creating right now, and it's brokerage to brokerage agreement. So on that brokerage agreement, you are going to have that information there that is going to help cover us. Sorry, just wanted to put that in there, working on that now.
So Deborah, how would that work though? Because, you know, let's just say that, you know, I'm working with you, right? And, you know, maybe I just say I lost 3 houses, Deborah. Maybe, you know, I'm not lucky with you. I'm going to try working with somebody else, right? You send me this letter of the 5 properties that you showed me. I go to another broker. What if I don't share that letter?
Well, the brokerage agreement is going to be shared at the beginning, number one, like our buyer representation, so that we know what the compensation is going to be between us. And then on there, you can add your buyer's name. So it is just like another little safety feature in there that they're going to be talking about.
Okay, I got you. So that's so what you're saying is when I call to, you know, XYZ Realty, right? And I say I want to show your house, they don't have the offer of compensation on the MLS. They say I'm offering 2.25%, 3.5% on this particular house. We then have a specific agreement before we show the property, correct?
Correct. And then where it
Or
comes into play is after 3 months, 4 months down the line, that buyer comes back with another agent. You've already registered that buyer on your buyer broker on your brokerage to broker agreement, brokerage to brokerage. Sorry. It's just another safety thing in there on what they were talking about that's being created.
Understood. Yep. So I didn't really I didn't think through that far about how we're going to get protected. And, you know, what happens, Deborah, if today I'm offering, you know, 2.5%, right? I show the property, and then, you know, there was an example of in the Palm Beach Gardens market where the builder upped their commission from 2.5 to 4 to blow out the units, and then I now increased the commission to 4%, right?
Right.
You saw it first at the 2.5. You know, you have to have some clarity on how's that going to work, because now I guess we can look in the MLS and say, when I showed it, this was what the commission was, and then you change it at a different date, you know, you might have some challenges.
You have to have it signed because you cannot make a single penny more than what your buyer representation agreement says.
All right, so Deborah, if it was 2 and then they increased it to 2.5 and you have a 3%. But
You're fine.
there are some issues that we just need to be aware of with, people changing the, that compensation, bar.
Right,
I mean,
right.
this is all, I think our competition is waiting for all the rules and everything to be laid out before they go and they talk to their troops. And, I'm proud that we're talking about this, even though we only have 90% of the answers, because, we're formulating better questions that will help, maybe even our leadership, come up with better strategies and processes to
Send
protect the
me your
client.
questions because I got 5 days in Washington. Send me all your questions and I'll get them answered.
And,
I have a question. This is Janet Boss. Just as we're talking about documenting, showing to buyers and being able to evidence that, I know our MLS system, or I'm sorry, showing time does allow us to record the buyer that we're showing it to. But, is there anything coming out that's going to help us to track, every home that we show to a buyer? Do we have to get them to sign it? Yeah, where are we going with this when we have to show proof that we showed this property?
Write the MLS numbers down on your, each showing that you have on your broker buyer agreement.
right. But I mean, Jen, I'm thinking that, the states are going to have a lot of overlay on the way that they do business. And I would imagine if you're in California, Oregon, Florida, Virginia, or New Jersey, if this buyer agency agreement is terminated by either me as the agent or the buyer, that we're going to have a procedure for saying that I showed you these 7 houses. If you buy any of these, that you're obligated to compensate me, right? So then maybe as a best practice, what we do is we keep that list. And then when the buyer agreement ends in 6 months, right, we look to see if that person bought that house, right? And see if you're entitled to a compensation. And then if they bought the house and they didn't pay you, you would have a equitable or you could put a lien on the property if you don't get satisfaction to how come you weren't compensated. I think it's going to make less, commission disputes because it's more documented in writing.
Yeah.
There might be a learning curve, but certainly, if you take in somebody who says I was working with, Janet and Remax in Tinton Falls, and now you're at XYZ Real Estate, you're probably going to want to say, can you share with me the properties that Janet showed you so that I don't have an expectation of getting paid on those?
Yeah, and I guess I guess that works, but it's relying on them to have the proper information. I know some states where they have showing reports and where we could kind of both evidence that we showed it, because the buyer may not remember, or the buyer may say, hey, I don't recall or deny that you showed a property to them and the dates. I'd be more comfortable if this is the way we're going to have something that shows in a system, or that they also confirmed it was shown to them.
And Janet, I think in this environment, if it continues, buyers will, and I'm going to use the term loosely, almost do anything to get a house, including, say, oh, I'm not working with an agent, or I never saw this with, like, I can totally see buyers doing that out of frustration. And keeping in mind that buying a house in many cases is one of the most stressful things in somebody's life. So I'm not defending it, but I think they do crazy things to get an outcome.
Go ahead.
So,
Rob, if I could mention, one of the things I do when I show houses is I print out the MLS sheet on it, and then I have the buyer write comments on the sheet so that we have a record of what they felt about each listing, and then I have them initial it. And I think that forms the record that you're looking for, Jen.
look at that, huh?
Yeah,
You-
I've shown
that-
that, but that's something that they normally keep. So I guess you keep it. I mean, I do the same thing. I usually
Take,
print
take
it out.
take a picture of it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's something
Hello?
that it was thrown out, like what should we be thinking about? And I think it's just something that we need to solidify more of a process around this if this is the way we're headed. Because if we break a relationship with the client and they don't want to pay a commission and the onus is on us of evidence, then we're gonna have it and not depend on them if they're looking not to pay a commission.
Rob,
So I
this is
just
Boss.
like more guidance structure around that.
I absolutely love that idea, Robert. Thank you for sharing. Bosch or Karma, did you have something?
Yeah, Brenniston, okay. On the agreement that I read, we can make in the file for the buyer, we can make a sheet that will list all the houses that we show him, and we'll let him initial it. At the end, if the contract dissolve or we don't work with him, we're gonna send him this list that we show his houses at this time. And according to the agreement, that he is responsible to show his new agent this list. And if he don't show him, he is in default, and automatically you will get your commission at the closing or we don't close. And that's what exactly written in the new proposal or agreement.
See what Robert was saying before when he has, he has them write all the information. We usually give them a customer copy and we keep the full copy of the MLS, but the customer copy is where they make their notes. So if that's where they make the notes, Robert, how do you collect that page from them? You'd
Well,
have to
that's
take,
why I don't. I have them put their notes on my copy so that I have that and I don't have to collect anything from them. But when we sit down to talk about what we've seen and everything, I pull it out and it's their handwriting with their comments and their initials on each sheet.
don't they want to keep that for their own records so that they know what they've just seen?
I've never had a buyer ask me for a copy of it.
Really?
It just kind of feel like, if you've got it, then you know what we're looking for and we just keep going.
Take a photocopy from it.
Yeah, or take a picture. I mean, we're getting into a little bit of a minutia area here. Everybody has a camera on their phone, right? Snap a photo. So anyway, are we starting to feel the creativity that we're coming up with to provide a better level of service and also to have a level playing field where it's fair?
Absolutely.
Like sometimes without written agreements, didn't we feel like we were a fool taking people around and not knowing if we're ever going to get compensated?
You
So-
bet.
Right? I heard a you bet from Karma because that's
I'm
the reality.
excited about it.
Right, because we say, hey, you don't have to pay us anything. And they go around with 22 different brokers for and has anybody on this call that's on camera ever, taken somebody to see a house and that they've seen it before with somebody else?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've seen this house. How did you see this house before, Ron? Oh, I was working with 9 other people that showed it to me. So that should stop, right? It should not be. And I don't believe it's in their best interest to work with 5 different agents. I think sometimes people have trouble making commitments and decisions, but now they need to have these conversations and decide who they want to commit to before the relationship progresses, right? It's a paradigm shift. And people who have gotten into the business after September of this year, once this normalizes, they're going to be like, how did you ever work like that? That doesn't make any, that doesn't make any, why would you take somebody out if they haven't agreed to work with you? That's crazy.
Yep. Now you're going to keep them loyal.
Huh?
Now you'll keep them loyal. They'll be loyal to you now.
And Ron, we're thinking of how we can demonstrate better value, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Because if there's a commitment, I think we don't mind investing more in the relationship and delivering more value. But it was hard for us to make a commitment to deliver all this value when we knew that they could just, ghost us or fly away, right?
Hey, Rob, I have a question. And
Yes.
I'm gonna laugh at myself as I'm just sitting here thinking about this. We've had multiple times over the years where a buyer was dealing with an agent that was less than professional, was not doing a good job, and they got a hold of us, whether it be through, Zillow, our listing, who knows what, and switched to using us because we were a breath of fresh air for explaining the process. So as we talked a few minutes ago about the, procuring cause and all these different ways everyone's doing that, if a buyer still wants to cancel, they can issue a letter of cancellation. Now, granted, if that letter agreement, that the buyer broker agreement states that there's some cancellation fee or something like that, they would have to pay it. But if the buyer fires in writing their buyer's agent, then aren't they allowed to go to a different buyer's agent?
Yes,
If they have
but,
a cause?
but here's something that comes to mind, Scott. Let's just say that somebody calls on Zillow, which this is I don't know, I think it might have been Trudy or it might have been Eric Funk. Somebody called up and said, "Hey, I'm working with a buyer's agent, but they can't show this house. Can you show me this house?" Right? Clearly, they don't understand how it works. Maybe they were thinking that they were the listing agent.
It was me. It was me, Jackie. But
Okay.
they didn't want to see one house. They were sending me like 5 or 6 houses. It was the weirdest thing.
Okay, and then they said they had a contract with somebody, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna work through these, but here's where I think it might become a little bit dicey is if somebody says I have a buyer's agency agreement. I don't think from a contractual standpoint or probably from a code of ethics that we're able to say, hey, I don't know what your agent's providing, but here's all the things I do for mine to try to induce them to break a contract. I would imagine that would be just like soliciting an active listing saying that, hey, your listing's been on the market for 123 days. Your agent must not be doing everything that I do. Would you like to cancel that listing and list with me? But if they do call you up and say, my listing's been on the market for 123 days, I'm thinking of canceling it and I wanted to know what you might offer. I think our conversation is a little bit different. So if somebody calls us up and says, I want to cancel my listing. I want to talk to you about, once my listing is canceled, what can you do for me? I do believe we can have that conversation, but I don't believe we can encourage that, like outward reach and encourage them to terminate. Anyone want to?
It's not necessarily even encouraging them though. How many times have we all dealt with buyers who were dealing with bad agents? And let's face it, Zillow was never the problem for our industry. It was all the bad agents that just paid for marketing that would get calls on our listings or situations like that. So if a buyer signed a agreement with a bad agent and now they want to switch to us because they see the value in using us, what's going to be the recourse to them canceling that buyer broker agreement to say, I'd rather deal with a professional now that I know the difference?
So Scott, if they were watching your video and they see you on social and they meet you at an event and then they say, hey, I want to cancel my agreement, I think that is something that we're in our lane. We have the right to do. But I think if somebody calls up like Jackie's client and says, hey, I have a buyer's agency agreement. I want to see if you could show me this house, thinking that you're the listing agent or whatever the heck they were thinking. I don't know that we're able to proactively try to, encourage them to break their agreement, if that makes any sense. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how this plays out with the code of ethics or even, contractual interference. But if somebody was doing that to my client, I would fight like hell on your behalf if somebody was trying to poach your client. So I kind of look at it from both sides. I want to encourage everybody in the few minutes that we have left is to have your voice and to not be like, hope they don't ask me the question about that litigation, right? Because it's complicated, right? If somebody somebody asks you, in my opinion, it might be a little bit too late to be fully transparent. In other words, I would like to see everybody proactively reach out to their clients. and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know about some recent changes that have happened in our industry that provide more transparency and options to both buyers and sellers. Have you heard about them? Right? This way, they're not asking you. If they ask you the question, if somebody has to ask me, I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me that? All right. And I really like the strategy of saying to people, hey, have you heard about the recent changes in our industry that provide more transparency and options to both buyers and sellers? And if they say no, hey, I'd like to get together and share that with you. Anyone who's, I use the example when I go to Florida or Virginia, I have to rent a car. I have to sign 27 times to rent a car, right? But people were able to go out and look at houses without signing anything. That makes no sense. That makes zero sense. Everything should be documented in writing. We were thinking that as a culture, right? Everybody would be like, oh, we'll help you. You don't need to commit. We'll show you these houses, right? And then if you buy, then we'll go fight it out. Who's the procuring cause, right? Well, they liked me. They saw like that. I think this is better, right? And I think it's better if we don't have to say, did you hear about the NAR litigation, right? Or did you hear about the lawsuit? We can say, hey, there are some exciting new changes happening in our industry that provide more transparency and options to both buyers and sellers. And if they say yes, they say, great, would you like to, get together? I could share with you how I could work with you and help you find your house, right? If they say no and say, hey, well, one of the big changes is as a buyer's agent, you have the ability to negotiate your commission and have a written agreement in advance. Let's have a conversation about that, right? As a buyer, I'd be like, that's good. Yes.
Am I muted? Are you muted?
Go ahead.
Excuse me, Rob. It's Jackie Godheim. I have a question.
Jackie, I'm going to mute everybody.
Agent.
Jackie, you gotta unmute yourself because somebody was not muted. Go ahead.
Okay. So, hi guys. Can, as an agent, can you on social media in your places that you normally advertise, somehow what you're saying, I don't know the wording, learn about the new laws, learn about how to select a buyer. What do you look for when selecting an agent to shop for a home? So I don't know the wording, but somehow in your ad, can they incorporate what you're saying with blurbs for advertising? Can you do a home buyer seminar instead of talking about, financing?
So Jackie, I think that, a home buyer seminar is something that I've been talking with our leadership team about. And I did one with our office in West Delray with Michael Gopi and his team. And I thought it was phenomenal. I enjoy helping people, talking to them about, how the process works, taking the fear out of all this change. So those are things that are great ideas. These are things that we're thinking of because of the change in the industry that's coming down the pike. I think on Friday or Monday, the courts gave preliminary approval. There was a court hearing date. It was either last Friday or the following Monday where they said, hey, we like this. It's going to the next step. And that happened a little earlier than it was supposed to. Now, because it's a class action, I believe it's not possible to be finalized until sometime probably after the July 15th date. And then there's also a 120-day window before it becomes finalized. It's very complicated, but all indications are that July 15th date is going to be the date that the industry is required to make the changes. I saw the president of NAR, Kevin Sears, talking with Byron Lazine, saying that, the plaintiffs and the defendants and the class are all being served by this being approved. So we see no reason why these things shouldn't be implemented on the deadlines that we talked about, which I thought was probably the best advice from a non-attorney. Just struck me as being very, very transparent. So doing home buyer seminars, that might be something that we do differently. Maybe we can attract the audience from social media, maybe video and stick. Do you put that in the chat, Deborah?
Oh,
So,
I'm sorry. I put something else in there for when you were done. It's a gift to everybody. Go ahead. Sorry.
okay.
Finish and then I'll tell you about it.
Oh, why don't you tell me about it now, and then I'll wrap up.
I'm sorry. This is a video that I think everybody should be using in our company. It's on sticky notes and it's really cute. It's like just over a minute. I don't know how to get it to play from here for everyone, unless you can, but it
Yeah,
is something absolutely perfect
I'll,
for
I'll,
everyone to use with their clients.
so Deborah, I'll do that. You can get it out of the chat, and I'll do that before we wrap up. If anybody wants to stay on, I think I could play the video here live.
They are going to use it all the time.
So all these people that didn't buy, they're now going to need to sign a buyer's agency agreement. When there were 30, 40 offers, and we all have an arsenal of people who weren't successful homeowners. And I think we need to reach out to them, say, hey, there's some exciting new changes happening in our industry, providing more options and transparency to both buyers and sellers. We're going to host a complimentary seminar to educate you on how you can benefit from this. Now, does anybody feel like anything in that statement there lacked integrity? I mean, we're just talking amongst the group, right? And if it doesn't, does anybody have an objection with that?
Nope.
So then we should be having these conversations with the people who weren't successful. And you know what, Ron? If it doesn't work with everybody, so what? Right? We're giving everybody the option to get educated and not to, where the worst place to get your education is? On the news.
Huh. Yeah.
Right? Because if you watch the news, the 6% commission is dead. Like,
Fake news.
like it was fixed, right?
Yeah.
And it's not the liberal or the conservative. It's not everybody was going out with that same message. So everybody is guilty of just parroting the message because what it did is attracted eyeballs, but it was false. Okay. We have to define our own value. We have to take back the industry, and we have the ability to do that. And if there are those of you who aren't the biggest fans, anybody on camera not the biggest fan of Zillow, it's okay to raise your hand, right? Because we know that they want to be our competitor. They want to be the Expedia to the travel industry. There would be no Zillow if everybody did their job. There would be no Zillow if everybody took care of their existing clients.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, just real quick, because I'm not clear on one thing. You've probably answered this 100 times already. If somebody says I'm not signing that, do they have to sign that? Where they like he says I'm not signing that, I'll find somebody who will work with me not to sign it. Is it like you either sign it or nobody's going to work with you no matter who you talk to? Is it cut and dry like that?
So you're not allowed by rule to work with them without a written agreement. Do people break the rules? Absolutely. But I wouldn't do it. I mean, any reputable agent that they're going to talk to is going to require them to define their business relationship. Okay. If you hire an attorney, for a car accident or even to buy a house, one of the first things they do is they send you an engagement letter. And that engagement letter, I believe, is there anyone that's an attorney on the call here? But I believe attorneys are required by their code of ethics to send you a letter before you're engaged saying that, as an attorney, I'm going to collect a 35% referral fee plus all my costs if I'm successful in this, or my hourly rate is this. So I think it might be either a law, the attorney's ethics, or a statute that require attorneys to disclose exactly how their business relationship works. If you hire a contractor to do work, the most reputable ones, they give you a written agreement, right? Robert, we wouldn't want to work with those people who don't.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing the validity of the agreement. I'm just saying, because I want them to sign it, but they said I'm going to go with somebody else who won't make me sign this. I was just wondering, is it like law? Like you can't have a listing unless they sign a listing agreement. I was just want to be sure it was across the board, so I could say, you know, with all due respect, you know, you have to sign this with somebody because nobody's allowed to do that. I just wonder if that cut and dry. That was my question, not like, is it a good idea? I think it's a good idea. I'm just asking.
So maybe if you attract some suspicious buyers who don't want to sign, and I mean, I've been at open houses with many of you, and clients won't want to sign a CIS form, right? Because they don't want to sign nothing. They're suspicious. So, you know, it's just we need to have those conversations. Say, hey, you know, any reputable person, every real estate professional is required by law or by rule to enter into a written agreement. If you're interested in having me represent you, let's have a conversation, and everything needs to be documented in writing so that there's no disputes.
See, I think that real quick, I just think that some buyers will probably say, well, I'm not signing that. I want my attorney to take a look at it before I sign anything.
That's what I see. I totally agree with whoever just said that.
So what I would do is I'd highlight and say, look, you know what, we're not gonna go out until Thursday. If your attorney looks at it, today is Friday, so you have 6 days. You can send me a written notice and you can terminate it with 72 hours notice. I'd highlight that part because we don't want people working with us that don't want to be here. It's not like we're trying to trick them into a 6-month listing on their home. Okay. Two quick things, and I know we're over 11 minutes already, but this is my suggested approach to anybody that we're talking to. Hey, you know, Robert, have you heard about the new changes in our industry that are providing more transparency and options for both buyers and sellers? Right. So it's a question. If they say no, let's have a conversation about it. Right. And we can explain that they need to have a written agreement. If they say yes, I'm like, that's great. If they say, is that something to do with that litigation? Say yes, as a part of that settlement, we had made some changes in the industry that help both buyers and sellers. I'm excited to have the conversation with you. I'm not going to go into explaining what I feel about it because that's irrelevant, right? What's relevant is there are some positive changes happening right before us, and I want us to be playing offense and reaching out. And we should call everybody in our database. If you don't have a database, look at every contact in your phone, reach out to them and say, hey, I just wanted to reach out to you and see if you heard about some of the exciting changes that are happening in our industry, providing more transparency and options to both buyers and sellers. Because I don't think anybody can debate me that there's not more options for buyers and sellers. I don't think anybody can debate that there's not more transparency, right? So those words in your mouth, repeated a lot of times, becoming second nature, not waiting for them to ask that question, will make you a better servant, will make you a more successful agent, in my opinion. Deborah, thumbs up, right? It was fun. Deborah Wiggins.
Question two. I'm sorry. Wait. One thing. I'm sorry. So listings that are already, say this takes effect July 15th, and listings are already in the system. Do those listing agents have to go back to their sellers and say, all right, you have to renegotiate, or is it locked in, like grandfathered in?
I believe that you'll probably see the listing agreements changing over time, but if not, you'd probably want to have like an addendum to the agreement saying that the listing will no longer be published online. It still will be offered, or it will be changed to a concession.
Yeah.
All right. So let's take a look.
Thinking about buying or selling a home on your own?
Well, I made a few notes to help you get started. Here they are.
Figure out how much you can afford. Check your credit report. Save for a down payment. List current home on the market. Mark your current home for sale. Clean and prepare home for showings. Consider offers. Negotiate the contract. Find an attorney to review the contract. Hire an attorney or title company to complete the closing. Research types of mortgages. Find a mortgage lender. Get pre-approved for a mortgage. Decide where you want to live. Decide what you want in a home. Check local school system report cards. Check local property taxes. Go to open houses. Research local amenities. Figure out how much you can offer. Submit an offer. Complete mortgage application. Order inspections. Obtain certificate of occupancy. Negotiate any repairs. Have the property surveyed. Review homeowners association documents. Order title search. Obtain title insurance. Secure homeowners and flood insurance. Calculate closing costs and how much you need to bring to the table. Conduct a final walkthrough. Whew. You think you can remember all that? Me neither.
When you're ready to sell your current home or to find the home of your dreams, write yourself just one note. Call a realtor today. Oh, and ask them if they're a realtor, a member of the professional trade organization.
Thank you for
Love
sharing
that.
that.
Love that.
That's great.
How can we get a copy? Is that from our board? Florida board?
We have had this around for a long time. I used to use it a while ago, and when I was up at FAR last week, somebody brought it up, and we all went, "Oh my gosh, we forgot about it." So the easiest it is on Florida Realtors. The easiest way is just Google sticky notes for realtors, and it'll come up. There's a couple of them, but this one is the funny one, and this is the one that most people love.
All right. So, Audrey, I don't know about New Jersey, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that link on that sheet that I send out. And hopefully you all know on the email, you get the video email. It has a document attached to it. And on that document is where the sheet that I shared with you is housed. And let me just find that. I'm not sharing my screen, but on that document I was reviewing before, I'm going to put that link to the video there, and I'll do a little bit of research, see if we can find one for New Jersey and for Virginia, and I do think there might even be a few other ones that I might be able to add there, because I do think that that the consumers think that we just open the door, right? They think that we just have access to MLS, and if they have Zillow, that we're basically not as significant as we once were. So I do think that does a very cute job at identifying some of the things that we do that they are unaware of.
And NAR is releasing some next week, or is they're supposed to release some next week?
So the NAR one would be more multi-state publishable, so that us in Virginia, New Jersey, and whatever other states, Pennsylvania, New York, where we work, they can use them there as well. So I can't tell you, like, I really am excited about it. I want to have everybody feel comfortable, instead of waiting for somebody to ask the question, to say, hey, I wanted to share with you some exciting news, some exciting changes in our industry that provide more transparency and options to both buyers and sellers. Have you heard about it? And whatever they say, they haven't. Hey, let's get together and talk about it. Our industry is transparent. Being more transparent requires things to be spelled out in writing, which I think is a great thing, right? I mean, it's just, everything is good if we can communicate it correctly. So have a productive weekend. If you have any individual questions, message me directly, and I'll see you all next week. And hopefully you're on your state call on Tuesday or Wednesday at 10 o'clock. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, Rob. This was great.
Thank you.